Welcome to ProfitLed Office Hours. I'm your host, Melissa Kwan. At ProfitLed, we share growth strategies with bootstrap entrepreneurs so you can accelerate your business. But knowing a strategy and implementing one can be two very different things, which is why every few episodes, I've decided to hold office hours and invite a fellow bootstrap founder on the show to use me as a sounding board and to also discuss or ask anything they want around building their company. Today, I have Meaghan Burns with me from Dunyasi Ventures. Hey, Meaghan, how's it going?
Good, thanks. Pleasure to be here.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, what you're doing, and where you're at today with your company?
Yeah, I'm the co-founder of Dunyasi Ventures. We started the company in March of 2021, and we focus on simplifying tech hiring. We do that by working with startups and high-growth companies to hire software engineers and leaders and to help them develop their talent strategies. The company started as kind of a happy accident. I wasn't really setting out to start the company. I started as a freelancer, and the demand just kept growing. And instead of telling clients no, I thought maybe I can train people what I know and build an agency. And so we actually had our first customers before we had a business. Our first customers were like, okay, how do we pay you? Wanting us to fill out our paperwork, and we didn't even have a company registered. So that was kind of a fun start, but we grew really quickly. Before I knew it, 3 months into the business, we had 10 employees. We had no systems, no training. I had never been in a people leadership capacity. I was always kind of an IC in my career before. So we grew really fast. We scaled. We had a very profitable, very exciting first year. But our culture was broken. And so I spent all of 2022 trying to build the culture, the systems, and the processes that I wanted for a long-term sustainable business. So we almost had to tear down everything we built to build back in a way of something that we wanted to run, sustainably through the future.
Got it. So how do you want to make the best or the most out of our next half hour together today?
I'm excited to be here and just to get this opportunity to speak with you. You're the first person that I found sharing their journey, building a business around their life and not a life around their business.
I'm a big advocate for that.
So I wanted to start it off, tell me more about your life and how you are building your business around your life.
I think that idea came to me when I left New York 7 years ago. No, I left New York 4 years ago. I moved there 7 years ago. I was there for 3 years. And I left New York to travel full time. My company that I was running in the past was creeping up to profitability. I had so many years of suffering. And finally, when I had the headspace just to breathe a little bit, at that point, I was no longer chasing bills anymore. I had the opportunity to ask myself, if building a company was going to be hard, well, how can I do something for me now that I've been fighting for so many years? So I always wanted to travel, never really did it as a kid. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do something for me, I want to be able to build this company from anywhere in the world. And at the time, we were just paying so much money to live in New York. We were paying $3,500 for a room inside a house. And we could have repurposed that somewhere else, right? We were looking at Chile, Argentina. I would just go on Airbnb and be like, where else can I go? And how much, how many days can I exchange for $3,500? And that was the first time that I understood that you can weave your life into your work in a sustainable and enjoyable way, right? I think a lot of people, when they think about work and fun, they think about work-life balance as if it's two things. I always think about it as one thing. If you enjoy your work, then it's hard to separate the two. It's just part of your day. I guess that was the first time I thought about how do I build my business around how do I want to live my life? And also because I was in different time zones, I was doing work and webinars and demos and all that stuff on opposite time zones of my customers. And while that was such an earned privilege, I absolutely hated that life. I hated how my work was infringing on my lifestyle and my ability to have fun. Right? It got to a point where I would get to a new city, and the first thing I would do at the next hotel and Airbnb is to test the Wi-Fi connection to see if it was fast enough to do my next Zoom call. And then we would go out, but I would have to go home at like 10 p.m. Or I couldn't have another drink because I didn't want to look too red for my next call. Or I would get up at like 4 a.m. just to go to the lobby to do my next demo. And it was just ridiculous. It was important work because it was my client work. But I just didn't enjoy how the business I had built at the time was not serving the way that I wanted to live. And the other thing that was happening was because I was selling enterprise, like customers required face-to-face. So the way that real estate software, which was my previous company, was sold through conferences. So first quarter of every year, all I was doing was chasing the next conference. But then I was also then not traveling with my partner, right? Like he would go to Bali and I would go to some conference in the middle of America. Or I had bought myself this dream trip to the Maldives as the present for selling that company. And I flew from the Maldives directly into Vegas to sit at a booth. And that was just like awful. I started to think like, if I had to redesign a business, what are the things that are important to me, like in my life that allow me to have fun? And what's the business that would fit into that, versus the other way around?
That's awesome. And your partner is now your co-founder in your current company. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it didn't start that way, but it ended that way. I was working with the same co-founder for like 8-9 years in my previous 2 companies. And like he was a good friend, an amazing engineer, but he was not a great CTO and he was not a great co-founder. And then that was actually where a lot of the friction came. And after almost a decade of working with the same person and those kind of frustrations, I thought I could start a new business without a co-founder. So I actually hired a dev shop out of Canada, and they were going to build like the first version of this product. And then I was going to move development to Vietnam, where it would be more affordable on an ongoing basis. And David, my life partner, he's a fractional CTO, or he was a fractional CTO for other companies. He was also always going to be like the advisor to bridge that gap. Like he was going to see how things were built and then advise on how to like transfer the technology. But then as he was monitoring the development, he started criticizing like, oh, this isn't right. This isn't right. And one day I'm just like, you know what? I don't know what these guys are doing. Like, I'm just a business person. Like, if this guy says they're going to deliver on their promise, then I have to believe them. I don't even know how to challenge them. If you're the one that's criticizing, why don't you go and fix things? And he started doing it, and then things started working. Like, it went from a product that was like totally gimped to a product that actually started to show. So I was with this guy for like, at that point, 5 years, and I never knew that he could code like this well. I knew he could code, but just not to that level. So then at the time I'm like, well, why am I paying these other people to build a product? Why don't like we end that relationship? And why don't we work on an arrangement where you can be my co-founder and we can build this company together? So that was actually how it started. And then at that point I realized a tech company without a CTO or co-founder is actually like a restaurant without a chef. So that's how that started.
Go into that a bit more, like as a non-technical founder of a tech company, what's your advice, or like what do you suggest for other people out there in that same position that their life partner isn't, a fractional CTO or coder?
Yeah, not everyone is as lucky as me, I guess. It turns out your best co-founder is next to you. You should always ask your partner if they could code, just in case. I guess my best advice is I think you can only find a business partner, like whether they're technical or not, as good as you are, right? Like, so I would say if you want someone who is an incredible coder, like the top 1%, you should try to be, or at least know, what you are also exceptionally good at. Right? Like you can't be like, oh, I want to start a company and I'm just going to go and find someone to opposite me, right? To like build this other part that I can't build. But you have to offer them something, right? So you have to be equally good at that thing. Like, is it marketing? Is it sales? It has to be like someone has to cover the business side, right? So if you're not technical, you need to get really, really good at something related to the business side to give comfort to the co-founder that you're trying to recruit as to why they should choose you over anybody else, right? But I think that advice goes whether you're looking for a technical co-founder or not. Like everybody wants someone who's amazing, but you have to have something equal to offer the other person, because the other person is at the same time, like you, looking to de-risk. So I think that's the best advice that I would give, is just get really, really good at something. Ideally, it's related to selling or marketing or generating revenue.
That's good advice. Thanks for sharing. What would you say your biggest challenge has been with building on the road?
I would definitely say like the time zones, especially if you're like North America to Asia, is probably the worst because you're 12 to 15 hours ahead. And then your calls are at 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. So while today I don't do any demos, I don't do any sales calls, I do a lot of customer touch bases or customer discovery. I do a lot of podcast recordings, webinar recordings, and they're all past midnight. And it's almost like the problem that I tried to solve for in the past has like come back in another way, right? Because the problem that I wanted to solve in the past was doing the exact same demo over and over again, or the exact same training, exact same onboarding. Now I'm still doing those calls, but they're just unique, which is way better, by the way. They actually require my unique attention, but it's still at like bad hours, right? I would love to be able to say, hey, let's go out for dinner, but I don't have to rush home at 10 p.m. or I don't have to stay up till 2:30 to do this next call. Like I would love that. But at the same time, that is such a privilege, right? Like the ROI and the benefits that you get from seeing the world, from being on the road and traveling and meeting people and being able to decide all of your own hours, like that's the ultimate freedom. So if having ultimate freedom means that I have to stay up and take a call at 2:30, I think that's fine. I would love to be in a place where I don't have to do all those things anymore, but maybe as a business owner, that's somewhat unrealistic. And then, of course, you've got same like time zone hours with connecting with a team, right? But now with so many tools that allow us to communicate asynchronously, that's a much lesser problem than needing to fit your schedule with your customers.
If you ever solve that time zone problem, let me know. That is something I battle with in my business every day. And my business is so, I got to be on the phone. I got to be talking to these engineers. I got to be talking to these leaders that are hiring. And I have the same problem. I spend a lot of time in Nepal as well. And sometimes I'll be like waking up in the middle of the night, taking a call at 4 a.m. But it's like you said, it's the ultimate privilege to be able to take that call anywhere in the world. Do you ever tell like your clients or whoever you're like speaking with, like, hey, I'm actually in Asia right now? Or do you just keep that to yourself?
That was actually my LinkedIn post today. In my past life, I used to think that I needed to lie to my customers about my lifestyle and where I'm at. But it also didn't make any sense because I was working harder and longer hours than anybody else. I just didn't want them to think I was on vacation all the time, because people don't have a concept of traveling, right? They think travel means vacation. Like travel means you're not working, but I'm only traveling to a place that I want to live at for this particular moment. But most people don't fully grasp that concept. So I did live a life where I try to lie to my customers, but then you can only lie for so long because it's like completely dark over here and it's like really bright over there. It just doesn't make any sense, right? When I started telling people this is my lifestyle, it became like the most interesting thing that we would talk about. It became like the point of every single conversation because people don't live that life and they're curious about it. I just hear so many stories of founders like pretending to be bigger than they are, making up aliases so they can handle support and sales as a different person so that their clients wouldn't think that the founder or CEO is actually doing sales on their own. I mean, that's just ridiculous, right? Your customers want to buy from someone they trust, and trust stems from being authentic to where you are, how big you are, your journey, and also how you live.
I struggle with the same thing, but I don't really like when it becomes a point of topic. Like before I was really giving my locations or sharing where I was, the air conditioner in the background or the AC unit is what would always catch me. Like people in the US would be like, where are you? I've never seen an air conditioner like that. And so then I had to start coming out and
Yeah.
being more truthful because that AC, but it's still something like I personally struggle with that as well. I keep it very quiet. I keep my location set to, Dallas, my US base, because I didn't like it being a conversation. But you bring some good points there.
Interesting. But why not?
I don't know. I think it's just something that like I have hidden for so long that now I just have to like get comfortable making that part of our story. And I think by living in Turkey and by traveling around the world actually is one of the things that makes my business great. But now it's just becoming confident and incorporating that into like our story and who we are. And you're definitely very like inspiring in how you're doing that yourself.
The thing is, it's such a privilege, I think, to live in this time. Only in the past 10 years have we been able to do this like on a budget and be able to go anywhere and to look for accommodations before we get there on Airbnb or go on Booking and just find like the most economical option that makes sense for you. And sharing economy has made that possible, right? And then we've got tools like Slack or like video recording, texting. Everybody's always connected on their own timeline. I just think it's such a privilege to be able to take advantage of that. And there's so many people that you meet that are like, oh, I wish I did this when I was young and now I can't. I think for anyone who can and who's even thinking about it, who doesn't have dependents or kids they need to put in school, if this is something you're thinking about, you absolutely should embark on that journey, right? Even if it's for a month a year or 2 months a year. It doesn't have to be your entire life. I always encourage people to do that because you know what? It does make you a better business person. It does make you a better leader because it makes you more empathetic about other people and where they're at.
And I think traveling as like an entrepreneur also really helps you deal with like adversity or like things beyond your control or like something you like having to deal with something that you didn't create or you don't understand. So I think it definitely develops a lot of like critical thinking and like patience as well. So going back to your dev team in Vietnam, did you hire a agency there or did you hand select and build your team?
Hey, I'd like to take a second here to talk about my own company, eWebinar, and our mission to rescue people from what I call webinar hell, to give them back their time and save them literally hundreds of hours every month through webinar automation. If your sales team is tired of doing the same demo over and over for unqualified leads or worse, prospects who don't even show up, an on-demand demo powered by eWebinar can help them get their time back so they can close more deals. If you're doing customer onboarding and training on repeat, eWebinar can help you automate those so you never have to do them live again. Customer success teams are using eWebinar to run hundreds of sessions every single month without a live host. Why don't you give our product a try and see for yourself? Visit ewebinar.com to join our own on-demand demo or to sign up for a free trial. All right, now that I've gotten that on my system, let's get back to the episode. Yeah, that's a really good question. We never hire developers directly, like one-on-one. We always go through a development shop. Huge reason for that. Developers, at least what I've been told in my experience, likes to work with other developers, right? They like to challenge each other. They like to see what the latest technology is, especially if you're in a dev shop environment. Like they want to see what's another cool project that I can go to or what are people doing nowadays, right? That's what interests them. We didn't want them sitting on their own because I think it would be hard for them to motivate themselves. But the other thing is we were going into a territory where we didn't understand the culture. We didn't understand like the work culture, for example. And in Vietnam, their written English is good, but their spoken English is not. So it's really hard to understand if you didn't have a middleman, like a PM, that like a team lead that translates like what they're trying to say, but also the connotation behind it. So for example, like Asian culture is not a culture where you are encouraged to speak up. So you do a task and you complete it and that's it. You don't challenge the person who tells you to do it, whether it's right or not. Whereas in Western cultures, there's more of an exchange, more of brainstorming that's encouraged. But in Asia, it's not like that. So if you didn't have someone in between as your middleman to tell you what your team's actually feeling or to help you read between the lines, it's super tough, I think, not just to work with them, but also just to produce really good quality work. Another reason is I personally Like I've been in startups for 12 years. I know that I suck at hiring people. Like I know that I'm bad at people management. That's why I wanted to come into this company having no full-time employees. Everybody's a contractor. And when you work in a development shop environment, if someone doesn't vibe with your team, you can switch them out. And you don't have to have that conversation personally. Like someone over there puts them on another project or realizes, oh, this person on that project is better for your team. So then they do the switch and all the awkwardness is gone. Right. And you don't have to worry about providing a nice office or benefits or anything. We still pay them as if they're full time. We still give them year-end bonuses. We treat them as our team members. But all that administrative stuff that I personally don't like is now onto someone else. And then when we want to bring more people on the team, I don't need to go out and find that person, which is, as you know, really, really difficult. Right. So if we wanted to add someone, they would go find that person or they would know, oh, that project's ending. Let's put them on your team. So I think for development purpose, having an agency like that makes a lot of sense. But everyone else, we hire and contract directly.
So another question I had for you. So this is your third business. Did you come right out the gates as a CEO? Or can you talk to me more about your transition from like founder to stepping into that CEO role?
I mean, as a small company, it's kind of the same thing, right? It's like a rose by any other name is still a rose kind of thing. First, you start a company and you're a company of one. So now you have to convince people to join you. And this is just by nature of needing to convince someone to join you. Like you've already stepped into the CEO role, right? And then what does a CEO do, right? You have to make sure that there's always money in the bank, right? That money never runs out. Like that is your number one priority. And then you got to constantly recruit and then retain these people. You got to convince people to join your team and not another team. And then you got to come up with a product idea and make sure it gets executed. And then you got to make sure that product gets out to market and people are going to start paying for it. And then you got to fill in all the gaps because there's going to be a whole bunch of gaps that no one's going to want to do. So as CEO, you're like, basically you're the janitor all the way up to CEO, right? And you're filling all those gaps, right? And then once no one's filling that gap, you got to find someone to fill it. So I think the CEO is the ultimate jack of all trades. And I wish I had the luxury of starting a business and saying, I'm only going to do the mature CEO stuff. Because I would say like 80% of stuff I do, I don't like doing. Like I don't want to do it. But then if I don't do it, no one else is doing it, right? I have not yet been in a position where my company is big enough that I didn't have to do like a whole bunch of things. But that actually goes for most people on our team. Like most people on our team are jack of all trades. They just do different things that I do. Like most people on our team fill multiple roles. And I'd like to keep it that way. I'm not inspired to have a big company. I'm inspired to have the smallest company possible with the lowest headcount. That is actually my goal. Like I don't get why people use hiring or the number of people on their team as like a success metric. I feel like that's a nightmare. You're like, whoa, 1,000 people on your team? What are all of them doing? Right? Yeah. Like if you gave me like 10 more people, I wouldn't even know what they would do. Like if you gave me 5 more people, I'd be like, okay, yeah, this is like a comfortable stage. I want to keep the team as small as possible. I want this to be a high revenue, high profitability company where everybody gets paid 2-3 times market salary. That's my ultimate goal.
We've seen the consequences of what happens when, companies are hiring, like their status comes from their number of employees and hiring. Like, I don't know if you're keeping up with the US tech market, but we are seeing layoffs in the 100,000 from companies that, were seen as so prestigious, doing so well because of their headcount.
That's also just a byproduct of getting overfunded. Right? That's a whole other issue. They're just trimming the fat, right? They hired too many people to begin with. They were trying too many things. And now they're just needing to go back to where they should have been 2 years ago.
I'm going to quote you here. I want my team to work less so they can have the freedom to do the things they love. This really resonated with me. And I know you briefly touched on it, but can you share more in kind of your how you like structured your business for not just you to be able to have that flexibility, but your team?
I'm an advocate that people need to work less, not more, always. We didn't design this product so people can do more productive stuff. Like, we've designed this product so people can be freed of their work. And so they could go spend more time with friends and family, or just like doing nothing at all. And the privileges that we talked about, right? Being able to have fully remote team, like travel full time. We actually don't have fixed office hours. Everybody on the team, they just show up when they want to. Like, of course, there's like a cadence, because then everyone else is there, or your customer is there. Like, some people are customer facing, some people are not. So your schedule is almost like dictated by that. But we don't have a thing where you have to be there at a certain time, a certain day, like clock in, clock out kind of thing. Everybody's just responsible for a task. We encourage people not to work evening and weekends, but we also say the customer comes first. I don't care what you do. I don't care how many vacation days you take. I don't care where you work out of. But if the customer needs you, and if it's a desperate situation, you have to be there. Like, if it's your code and something breaks and it's a Saturday, you need to go fix it. Everybody comes into a company and says, yeah, I've definitely been looking for a company like that. But a lot of people aren't willing to actually do that. In the past, I've hired a lot of people that love the privilege, but they'd be like, oh, but it's Saturday. But you can't enjoy the privileges of this culture, but not be able to also put in the work when that is required. That's kind of how we structure it, is like, all the freedoms that I have are the freedoms that everyone else has. And when somebody comes to me and says, I'm not working today, I'm taking this Friday off, they're not asking. They're just informing me that that's happening. And it would be a shock to them if I said, no, you can't. Even though they're like contractors, they still act like full-time employees, but they express that freedom and they execute that freedom not because they're a full-time contractor. They're still responsible. They are able to execute it because they know that they're trusted. What I've learned also is, like, there are so few things in this life that can't wait till tomorrow.
I have one last question for you. So in your second company, I believe that your real estate company, that's when you were like unprofitable for so long, right? And you had to like take a lot of like risks and take out loans. And how did you stay like motivated and, through those hard times to get to where you had your 7-figure acquisition?
That was so hard. Anyone that's living through that right now, I totally feel for you. We were in a place where we didn't know if things were going to work out. Like, I was like too deep into the journey to go back. I had my co-founder to be responsible for. We had customers, but not enough. Like, I didn't want to shut it down. Like, it was just a really hard place to be. The only motivation was the fear of regret. My co-founder and I had come up with this mechanism. Like, I remember once he came to me and he was like, well, I want to do some other things. It doesn't really feel like we're going anywhere. I don't want to leave you hanging. Would it be okay if I go and explore something else? But I just, I'm still with you. And that is literally the worst thing that a CEO can hear from a CTO, is them losing motivation to stay with your business because they're not having fun anymore. And at the time, of course, I'm panicking. I'm like, okay, what do I say to this guy? I also don't want to be the person to hold someone back, right? Like, that's just the worst place to be in. I want them to go and thrive, but I also didn't want to let the business die. So I had asked him at the time, like, okay, so if our company were to shut down tomorrow, like, worst case scenario, what would you do? Let's talk through it. And he was like, well, I would apply for a job at Facebook or Amazon. I'm like, great. Like, what would they pay you? And he's like, oh, I don't know, like maybe like 100, 125,000. I'm like, okay, so our worst case scenario is you get paid more, right? From someone else. But if we shut down tomorrow, like, how would you feel? Right. And he's like, well, I guess I would always wonder if we did enough, right? I would always wonder if there was like another door we didn't go through. And I'm like, okay, well, great. Like, that's how I would feel. So let's make that the decision-making process, right? If anytime we feel demotivated, let's just ask ourselves, are we going to regret that decision? And if the answer is yes, let's keep going. If the answer is no, then there's no point. We're not making any money from this, right? We're constantly struggling. So it was literally just like the fear of regret and what else would happen that kept us going. It wasn't reasonable at all, but neither is being a startup founder. Every day you do things that are unreasonable. So of course you have to make unreasonable decisions. And there's no way you can know if something's going to work until you do it. And that could be like months in the future. And luckily that worked out for us. Eventually we got enough customers to like float ourselves. But I have seen a lot of founder friends and a lot of startups that didn't come out well on the other end. And sometimes like you need to say no and you need to shut things down in order to open up new opportunities. It definitely was not like anything reasonable that kept me going.
That's powerful. I appreciate that insight.
Before we end our time together today, I have a question for you. You've built a pretty successful company, also bootstrapped, grew really quickly. What are some words of wisdom that you want to leave with our listeners today who are bootstrap founders focusing on driving growth and profitability?
No excuses, only solutions. That's our number one core value in my company, my number one life value. And I think about that every day. And as a bootstrapper, you can't sit and make excuses. No one's going to save you. It's up to you to make your own solutions to keep on going and deal with any problem you're faced. And be ready to take on a great deal of personal responsibility.
Absolutely. I feel like that should be like a bumper sticker or like a laptop sticker. Yeah. So Meaghan, how can people connect with you and learn more about your company?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best place to find me. I'm there pretty often. And my name is spelled Meaghan, last name Burns, Burns.
Awesome. Well, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to ProfitLed and be notified of new episodes. Head over to our website, profitled.fm, to see the show notes of this episode as well. If you are a bootstrap founder who's grappling with building your business and would like to be a guest of mine during office hours, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Melissa Kwan, last name spelled Kwan. Meaghan, again, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to ProfitLed. If you enjoyed this episode, we hope you will subscribe to the ProfitLed podcast and head over to our website, profitled.fm, to see the show notes of every episode. You can also join our mailing list to be notified of new episodes or when we have interesting products and resources to share. We promise to only share things you'll actually care about. Thanks again for listening. Bye now.